Hello art friends! Today we're going to finish up the pictures that we started last art class inspired by the artist Kehinde Wiley. So I have my finished example here. This one is definitely finished. I've signed it, and today I'll be showing you how to finish these, some tips about that. Also, we'll learn a little bit more about this artist Kehinde Wiley. I have my Toni Morrison one that I feel like maybe needs a bit more, and I'd like to bring the background into the figure like Kehinde Wiley does, and I've done that here on my completed Basquiat. And then this one, I still have some coloring to do on this. So I'll talk to you today about Kehinde Wiley. We'll learn more about him, and then we'll finish up our art project. So let's get into it. Okay, here I am working on the background for my Kehinde Wiley inspired piece, and we got off to a great start on that yesterday, and I'll tell you more about finishing that up. But first I want to share with you a news segment from CBS Sunday Morning where they interview and talk to Kehinde Wiley about his work as an artist and his life, and so I think that's the best way for us to learn more about this artist. So let me show you that.
For a different perspective on the man on the street, you need only look at the works of a rising young painter, as our Rita Braver has been doing.
If you look at all of the paintings that I love in art history, these are the paintings where great, powerful men are being celebrated on the big walls of museums throughout the world. What feels really strange is not to be able to see a reflection of myself in that world.
So the New York-based Kehinde Wiley set out to create a new paradigm. Men of color in street dress, painted in classical style, often echoing masterworks. The images are considered so hip, they've even been used as a backdrop in the Fox series Empire.
Kehinde Wiley.
Yes, indeed.
And with paintings selling for as much as $400,000, the work is considered important enough that though he is only 38, a survey of his career is now on view at the Modern Art Museum of Fort Worth after opening at the Brooklyn Museum.
His work has a broad appeal to high art culture mavens, as well as to people who don't know anything about art but are taken by his references to hip hop and to street culture.
But Eugenie Tsai, who curated the exhibit in Brooklyn, says that beyond their social statements, the paintings have undeniable artistic merit, as in Wiley's version of St. Andrew.
There's so many ways you could read the face of this young man. Deliberate, do you think?
I do think it's deliberate. I think one of the hallmarks of great art is a little bit of ambiguity where things aren't spelled out for you. There's room for interpretation on the part of the viewer.
With his over-the-top persona, Kehinde Wiley has been compared to Andy Warhol. And like Warhol, he's a celebrity magnet. Michael Jackson commissioned this portrait. VH1 ordered up a whole series featuring rap stars. But it's been a hard road to fame. He was raised in Los Angeles, where his mom ran a second-hand goods store to support the family.
About how old were you when it started to click that, hey, this is what I like to do, art's what I'm all about?
My mother sent me to art classes at the age of 11. I began to have kids around me say, will you make drawings for me? Will you make a painting for me? And it really clicked.
He was good enough to earn a Master's of Fine Arts from Yale, and in 2002, a prestigious artist-in-residence slot at the Studio Museum in Harlem. It was in Harlem that he found this mugshot on the street.
It crystallized something that I'd been thinking about for a very long time, which is that black men have been giving very little in this world, and that I, as an artist, have the power and the potential and the will to do something about it.
So he and a team of helpers began pounding the pavements of New York, asking young black men if they'd like to be photographed and painted in classical style. But some critics have charged that Wiley is actually exploiting his subjects and that the work is cartoonish.
Does that hurt, or do you look at it as a learning experience?
You can't allow that to be what dictates your work. You simply have to say that they're talking about me.
And he can be mischievous. Take a close look at Napoleon leading the army across the Alps.
In small ways, I'm taking little jabs at the masculinity, the bravado.
Then there are these intimate portraits in 15th century Flemish style.
So I know that this particular portrait has a special meaning for you.
Well, this is the first time I've done a portrait of someone that I'm romantically involved with. This is Craig Fletcher, my partner of 3 years. And I think this is a perfect way of having artistic inspiration and personal stories sort of come together.
Wiley has traveled the world painting young men from Brazil to Morocco to Israel. And now he's added women to his artistic repertoire.
Excuse me.
As shown in the PBS documentary, An Economy of Grace, he once again chose models from the New York streets.
I can tell when you're getting into it. You're like, all right, yeah.
But this time, he didn't paint them in their street clothes, but in designer gowns and fantastic hairdos.
The colors aren't quite right yet.
He finished much of the work at a second studio he keeps in Beijing, where, in a tradition dating back to the Renaissance, assistants do much of the background work. This is a rare Wiley painting where the subject turns away from us.
What it does is it heightens the picture even more, so it charges the space because we want it more.
And right now, the world seems to want more of Kehinde Wiley, which still amazes him.
I started making work that I assumed would be far too garish, far too decadent, far too black for the world to care about. I, to this day, am thankful to whatever force there is out there that allows me to get away with painting the stories of people like me.
The final thing before we get back to our project that I want to show you is one of Kehinde Wiley's most famous paintings, and that is the portrait that he did of Barack Obama, which hangs in the Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery where they have presidential portraits. And so this is arguably one of his most famous paintings of our former president, Barack Obama, who selected Wiley to paint his portrait. So a real honor there, and something that I wanted y'all to know about before we get back into our project. So here we go. Okay, guys, so now we know a little bit more about the artist Kehinde Wiley, and we're ready to get started on finishing up our Wiley-inspired pictures. Now, before I cut this Basquiat, before I cut the figure out to attach to the background, I'm creating some imagery that mimics that looks like what's going on in the background to have go on top of the figure. What Wiley does in his artwork is he'll have parts of the background imagery come in front in the foreground. Background's what is behind the figure, foreground's what's in front of the picture. And so he unifies the background and the foreground by having some of those background images come on top of the figure to connect those two parts, since the style of the painting is really different from the background of the foreground. So that helps unify it, help everything feel like it belongs together. You can use some scrap paper for that, or here I'm using the photocopy, so I had some extra room there. I took the little label for Basquiat to attach to the back so I can remember who that artist is, and now I'm obviously, in fast forward here, cutting out my image of Basquiat. Better to leave a little of the white edge than to cut off any of your figure. So if you need to leave a little white edge, that's fine. What you don't want to do is cut off any of that person. And so getting so close to the person, especially with Basquiat, like his hair was a lot of detailed cutting, you can go a little bit just outside that line and leave a little bit of the white and even color it in to match the background. So that's my cutting tip, and then I'm cutting out those elements that I'm going to have overlap, be on top of the figure to unify the picture, to help everything feel connected. And then I'm throwing away those scraps. Did you see that handful of scraps? And now I'm ready to glue my figure and then decide where to place my other elements. And This I'm going to discourage you from doing. I went back in with black crayon and I kind of wish I hadn't. So if I were you, I would skip this step. Don't go in with the black. It's a little too risky, and you could mess up your picture, and we don't want that to happen. Now, here's a technique. Before I show you the final step, I wanted to share with you how I got this tie-dye background effect using crayon. So I'm going to show you that, and then I'll show you the very last step for finishing up our picture. So I started with a red dot and then little squiggly marks, and then I picked a red orange and then an orange and built up going over that part. So I overlap, building up those colors and going from one to another in rainbow order to create a tie-dye effect. And that's good if you have some places that you want to fill in not with a solid color, but also not with a flower. So that's a fun technique to try. That tie-dye effect with crayon, and again, just rainbow or color wheel order, I should say, which is the same, to build those colors. And you don't have to fill in all the white space. On my Toni Morrison one, I had some white space, and that's fine. You don't have to cover the entire background. The very final step is to sign your name. So when you're done, and here, if you want to try blending colors, you can try with a white. It didn't work as well on here, but I've had other cases where blending with white worked really well. In your neatest handwriting with a black crayon or a pencil, you want to sign your name. Traditionally, artists sign in the bottom right-hand corner, and then you're done with your picture. And I am so excited to see your finished work. All right, let's get to it and enjoy.